all see that? Yes, great. So today's presentation, I've captioned it or titled it "A Deeper Dive into Justice, Immigration, and Policy Through Theater, the Center for Socially Engaged Theater, CSET in the making." I'd like to welcome you again for being here. And it's been a very long week, so thank you for coming. And to start, I'd like to also acknowledge that the University of Regina is situated on the territories of the Nahiyawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Mischief Nation. And also to recognize that the University of Regina is on Treaty 4 lands with a presence in Treaty 6. And the piece around land acknowledgement, I know that there's a lot of conversation around it being performative and also really questioning the intentionality behind that. And for me, my go-to is always the fact that I am originally from Nigeria, migrated to moved to Canada in 2015, and so constantly moving between here and there, and then thinking about the historical relationship, the fact that Nigeria was colonized by Britain, and we had our independence in 1960, and then coming here to Canada and see those similarities in terms of language, in terms of the rules and those connections. It's something that constantly sits with me. And of course, as you would see, my presentation sits at the heart of my work. I also want to acknowledge my PhD students that are here. I can see you all. Thank you for attending, and really thank you for the great work that we're all doing together. So today, this presentation is aimed at achieving three things. One is what I've captioned an accountability exercise, and I will get onto that. Particularly my proposition when I did my job talk sometimes in 2020, and what my proposal to the community is. So this is a way of coming back to say, this is what I propose and this is what I've created. And from a very from my own background, that's also very important, because as much as we're in scholarship and writing and doing research, it is always with, and so it's always important to always come back and say, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing, and how the community sees that and hopefully find their voice in that. The second thing is around creating awareness around my research agenda and what that looks like. And of course, to kind of present the research portfolios and future plans at the Center for Socially Engaged Theater. I've outlined these into two sections. One is a snapshot of this year's Socially Engaged Theater Research Program, and I will go into an overview and some snippet here and there in terms of some couple of projects and the phases that the research program is about, and how that then fits into and I will introduce CSET to everyone. So Canada prides and brands itself as an inclusive and progressive immigrant country, as the first nation to adopt a multiculturalism policy with the objective of assisting cultural groups to overcome barriers to integrate into Canadian society. Canada continues to promote its global identity as a multicultural nation where race, that's a plural race, harmoniously coexist. However, the Canadian landscape has been shaped by its imperialist history, from its ties to the transatlantic slave trade through settler colonialism to modern day systemic racism. The colonial systems not only privilege one race over the other, but it also laid the foundation for the continued dispossession of the rights and properties of indigenous and other marginalized groups. Here, state surveillance and policing were created and sustained as a system of compliance and control. With the deepening of globalization, the associated rise in immigration and trans-border interaction has meant that immigrants and refugees will continue to find themselves in a country like Canada, where they must contend with a colonial past and present systemic racism. In fact, many have fled persecution and prosecution or voluntarily left their countries, hoping for a better life in the promised land. That's the open, democratic, and multicultural Canada, have found they must navigate new systems of oppression they do not necessarily understand, including race-based policing and surveillance. In this national context, Regina, where we're situated, is an important provincial site for investigating and, of course, the staging of new forms of anti-colonial activism. It is the home of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Academy, the very institution that has historically trained and disseminated across all regions of Canada. The very officers enforcing Canada's racist and oppressive colonial system. Hence, from Indigenous youths and families to Black Canadians and newly arrived immigrants and refugees from Africa and elsewhere, questions of belonging, membership, and membership, it's at the level of local level, the national, the political, cultural levels, racial justice and fundamental human rights are critical to their present and future realities. For many disciplines, including theater, these issues serve as the bedrock of claims for social justice, racial equity, and policing and public engagement. In fact, theater's power to create awareness, disseminate knowledge in a relatable way, and galvanize communities create possibility of engaging citizens, policymakers, organizations, and of course, institutions. So the CRC, the Canada Research Chair Program in Socially Engaged Theater, is designed to better understand how theater can create performance space for intergenerational and intercultural conversation on these issues. The CRC program includes theoretical examination of these issues, ethnographic study, devising and performance creation, and of course I will go into detail of all of that later on in my presentation, community theater, and workshops in Saskatchewan and of course on the Canadian prairies, and of course academic publishing. While the impact of globalization is often complex and contradictory, it also contributes to provocative ideas of hybridity and post-colonial thinking. The cosmopolitan citizen, my apologies, the cosmopolitan citizens and the interpretation of identities. So a world without borders. Since art mirrors and reflects society, Canada's theater scene is increasingly influenced by the effect of these discourses around globalization and the processes by which they are mapped onto the country's systems. Contemporary productions are also concerned with questioning Canadian history and its current socio-cultural milieu. Theater practitioners continue to critically and creatively examine the world around them and search for ways to utilize theater to address key social issues. So in the current period of history, characterized by polarization, racial injustice, and abuse of human rights, as we see in our world right now, it seems it's just very obvious that it becomes our daily realities now. The need for approaches that can humanize human experiences, particularly BIPOC experiences, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and build empathy through narrative has never been greater. Theater as an affect-driven and interactive tool in artistic, educational, social, and therapeutic context can serve such purposes. So the objectives, therefore, of the CRC are threefold. One is to lead a range of projects focused on how theater and performance in Saskatchewan and on the prairies can initiate new dialogues concerning issues of race relations and membership, social justice, and human rights. Secondly, is to create innovative artistic programs in socially engaged theater. And I will also speak broader on that idea how theater has been conceptualized. It's been conceptualized broadly to include that idea of holistic, complete theater, dance, drama, music, and all of that. So, in a broader sense of theater. And of course, to mobilize community ideas that will inform policies to reposition voices on the margin and bringing them to the center of the conversation. So these broad objectives will underpin projects that examine the following research questions. One, that in what ways can theater expose power relationships and oppressive practices that have been normalized by the dominant culture? 2 is more specifically, how can theater create safe and brave spaces to explore systemic racism in policing in order to safeguard human rights? I know there's a lot of literature around and a lot of different ideas around safe spaces. I won't go into that detail, but the idea of creating safe space here is understanding that creating empathy, there's need for safe spaces, safety, before we can build empathy. When we're in a space where we're anxious or we're being pulled down or we're being dehumanized, and that's not safe. So that's the idea of safe and, of course, brave and courageous, a brave space for courageous conversation around all of these big ideas and, of course, these experiences. And the goal is that by posing these questions, I continue to examine how identity, belonging, and membership are negotiated and demonstrate the most effective ways for anti-racism strategies to be taught. And that also speaks in terms of pedagogy, which I will come to later in my presentation, and learn through interactive community-based theater practice. So these are the 5 phases, 5 interconnected phases of my research program right now. And of course, this is also conceptualized within CSET. And I also have to say that each of these agenda they are based on various areas of my own research, and of course, the other kind of research and collaborations, and of course, with both my doctoral students and non-resident research associates at the center. So I've kind of grouped all of the researches into these 5 interconnected phases. And like I said, they are connected to my own work, my own research. So applied theater, justice and policing kind of speaks to how do we engage theater within the context of policing, surveillance, justice system, and all of that. Immigration theater, expectations, belonging, and identity. This phase will provide, or provides rather, the artistic and creative means for newcomer youth populations and their families who identify as BIPOC to investigate their resettlement process, belonging, and identity through the power of anti-oppressive and anti-racist theater frameworks. And that's the brief about immigration theater. And there are already project ongoing already that really speaks to that. I'm currently just finished devising a performance with the Ugandan Canadian Association of Saskatchewan, UCAS, where I devised a piece with them around what's in a name, and then of course did a documentary around that. And of course I'll also speak more in regards to that in my later presentation. So in moving forward in this particular phase, this immigration theater is to conduct ethnographical studies, interviews of immigrant stories, storytelling activities, the drama workshops, and interactive live performances. The second one I'd like to highlight, or rather the third one, which is the play that inform policy, or it's around creative economy, community and cultural policy. It's the use of community engagement to find opportunity to work with community in a way that they can forge the new path for the creative economy. And that's very, very sectorial based. And of course, the Future Prairie Theater Project falls on that category. Art, health, and wellness. Wellness speaks to the intersection of art in really conversation around health and, of course, well-being. And of course, finally, the decolonization and applied performance in cinema also speaks to how we engage all of these ideas around post-colonial thinking and decolonization within the context of cinema and, of course, transnational cinema and all things like that. I'd like to quickly just highlight just 2 projects. Like I said, there are many of them happening already. happening right now. I just wanted to highlight just two of them. One has started already, and the second one, we're launching that in some couple of weeks. The future prairie theater, which I mentioned earlier on, the idea is to imagine and rebuild prairie theater. It's a sector driven project. The goal of this initiative is to engage independent professional artists and sector leaders in identifying thematic directions and questions that will move the theater sector on the prairies forward. Of course, the project is now housed in CSET, and then it's a series of 10 conversations that started in October 2021. And interestingly, we just did the 10th episode this past Monday. And it's interesting the array of ideas that are come out of the 20 hours engagement with community members. So the team, the research team, myself, including two of my PhD students, Tunde Onikoyi and Ibukun Fason, and then my collaborator at the University of Calgary, Professor Christine Brubaker, a researcher and a indigenous playwright at the University of Saskatoon, Yvette Nolan, and a research assistant also, Kali Sproul, and some other community members. We're at the point right now where we're just going through, the conversation and what came out of that entire conversation. I also want to mention the fact that that particular project has been supported really immensely by a lot of the theater companies on the prairies, from Manitoba to Saskatchewan, and of course to Alberta. So it's really very interesting to see how we now engage in, pre-COVID, really thinking about how do we reimagine and forge new direction for the prairie theater within the context of a community-led conversation, as it were. The second one I'd like to highlight, and we're launching this, we're starting this next month, April 22nd. It's really around one of the research agenda on policing, dialogue, policing, and community. It's really, we're breaking this down into some different levels. And we're really excited that it's in collaboration again with the Regina Police Services, and of course Saskatchewan Police Service. This is Saskatchewan Police Service, and some other agencies and organizations on the prairies. And so before going into devising and working with community around this sensitive issue, I felt that there's a need for us to engage the community in having this conversation around some of these ideas. And that's because these are really heavy conversations and heavy themes and topics, and we're at different points in our journey in this conversation. So a way to kind of rally around and mobilize us towards this direction. So we kind of create, some couple of opportunities to bring members from community, both within our university here and of course other places in the prairies, and some couple of folks outside the prairies, to really have a conversation around what policing and community, for example, social dimension of policing, addressing the elephant in the room around police reforms and things like that, so that it can then prepare us into the next phase, which is going to be around storytelling, verbatim theater, and other kind of creative opportunities that that's going to give to us. So in 2000, and at the beginning of this presentation, I did say that part of the goal of this presentation is that is an account of accountability. And so during my job talking in presentation in 2020, I shared my vision to create a research hub that will explore issues critical to human ecology with art-based and participatory methods, and thrive on community relationships and collaboration with diverse stakeholders. So today I'm also unveiling the center so that the community, both here at the university and of course outside the university, even outside Regina, those that are joining us and those that will see this later, can actually have a peek into what this center is about. So the Center for Socially Engaged Theater, and which is obviously from my presentation, kind of came out of my CRC, is proposed, and it was proposed and of course created now as a place to bring together these research agenda that I've been talking about. The CSET research I carved out of my ongoing research portfolios, and it's through multiple socially engaged creative projects. The center explores social issues that touch on intercultural dialogue and creation, and the ethical realities of such practices. And of course, ethics is also at the heart of what we're doing, because when we're engaging with community, there's always a how. And of course, we all know that, it's not just about good intention, but how do we go about that in an ethical and sensitive and responsible way with community. So for instance, the use of storytelling as an art-based method can raise ethical issues such as cultural appropriation, politics of representation, language, and danger of a single story, a danger of a single story or master narrative. The context of indigenous communities and other diverse communities in Canada, there has been an ethical complaint of being over-researched and knowledge drained, because many researches have been conducted on them, and among this population with little or no results. So in some respect, there are results, but researchers end up benefiting more than the community by using such knowledge to advance their career. And these are really ongoing conversation in community, in literature and things like that. So specifically, the center is interested and is created to explore how decolonization, and of course, as we continue to engage in our community here with indigenous, in our community here, is to think about indigenization, decolonization, and indigenization as discourses that shape the ethics and pedagogy of socially engaged creative practice among vulnerable populations, with specific focus on addressing local and global issues such as politics of representation, narratives and counter-narratives, identities, language, memory, histories, testimony, participation, cultural policies, and imbalances of power. I want to back up a little bit to say that the past 3-4 months has been really me working with the designer. We had the opportunity of working with a designer that's sort of, I've been designing this website. So, CSET.ca, where, all these are research agenda and all of those things are there. It's been really a great opportunity to have that space to do that. So the CSET is it's the Center for Socially Engaged Theater, therefore, is housed within the Faculty of Media, Art, and Performance at the University of Regina, and is a centralized location for the ongoing research associated with the CRC and Socially Engaged Theater program. It is conceptualized as a research hub to explore issues critical to human ecology with art-based and participatory methods. And I'll speak later on to that in detail around devising and performance creations, particularly how that connects to Department of Theater's new program that that is being launched, because also finding ways to strategically position all of this research so that they speak to one another, both within the theater department, within the faculty, and of course within the university and outside. It's really very important in creating a robust center that thrives on community relationships and collaboration with diverse stakeholders. It's also conceptualized as a incubator to connect people and ideas for intellectual and artistic engagement among scholars, artists, drama educators, community partners, policymakers, and collaborators across different stakeholders, sectors committed to engaging with the CRC program research questions. So CSET is envisioned as an ethical space of possibility, drawing upon both qualitative and quantitative methodologies with the understanding that individual and community well-being can be sustained by people's capacity to emerging. So therefore, the goal is to, one, explore issues critical to human ecology. It mentioned that, is to build community relationships and collaboration with diverse stakeholders across different sectors, and then to create space where we can think globally by engaging with global ideas, but then in a local way, act locally and then personally. A line of inquiry divided into these 3 levels. One is to lead a range of projects that focus on how theater and performance on the Canadian prairies can initiate transformation and new dialogues around these issues, anti-racism, race relations, belonging, social justice, and human rights, to create innovative artistic programs in socially engaged theater, and of course, to mobilize community ideas to inform policies for repositioning voices on the margin to the center. And I wanted to talk about the idea of mobilizing, because I think that part of what we're doing, for example, with the Future Prairie Theater is really to mobilize, is to, of course, we thought about that idea, that project, and, we took a lead on that, but then in collaboration with other partners, but then we become that space where we mobilize communities, specifically in this context of this work, of this particular, of Future Prairie Theater, in the context of theater sector on the prairies. So our approach is around that idea of praxis. We're very intentional that it's not either or, that it's and, that that a theory informs practice and practice informs theory. And so that idea of praxis is really very important, especially because we're constantly working with community. And I'll come to methodology in a sec. So this is what I've called CSET praxis. They're really our core values. Critical pedagogy as a teaching approach which attempts to help students question and challenge domination and beliefs and practices that dominate. And of course, critical pedagogy also for us is really important to rethinking how do we decolonize, the classroom, right? Also to think about in terms of post-colonial theory, and of course that kind of fall also a lot of my work and really falls under that theory also in terms of in a set of theories and practices we seek to explore the legacy of colonialism in the present day, and it's also about cultural resistance against cultural dominance. Participatory development, and this is something that my own practice came out of data for development, and it's always, rather than thinking global north to global south, but really think about how can participation or participants influence and share control over a development initiative or over something that really focus on them. And in discussing development here, it's not just about economic development. We're talking about an horizon and broadening of our intellectual curiosity and capacity to imagine, to think, and find changes where needed and when needed. Agency is critical in the sense that because we're part of our core value is really engaging community-based approaches so that communities and collaborators and those that we're going to be working with can harness their voice. We recognize that they have their voice already, but how can we, in whatever way, amplify it if we need it to be amplified, and at times if we need to actually keep quiet and allow them, do whatever they need to do. But providing that agency is just very critical. And of course, I did mention about the fact that it's community-led as a way to inspire, empower, and lead participants to acknowledge their imagination and grow their confidence to create and nurture effective strategies for their lives and communities. Decolonization is very critical. I think I did mention that earlier on at the beginning. And this is also very important in thinking about the ethics of human interaction to shift dialogues and challenges oppressive systemic structures and provides new diverse narratives. Devising, and this is where earlier on, devising, apart from the fact that it is part of our own method, as she said, and a part of my own work as an applied theater practitioner. I also find this very interesting because it connects to the Department of Theater's new program on device theater and performance creation, and finding ways that, that devising, whether with students or with community, can find a way to create collaboration and help us, whether in the development and research and investment and all of those things, that it will help us to create a process where we're constantly in conversation with one another through the creative space and exploration. Which then means that all that I've said has to thrive on collaboration and relationship building. And that has been conceptualized under these 5 areas of collaboration. So at CSET and also in my research, when I'm talking about, when we're talking about collaboration and relationship building, we're talking in terms of intercultural, international, intersectional, intergenerational, and interdisciplinary. And those are really important in actually creating a robust research agenda, and also in finding and always answering the so what question. That's a big question I constantly ask in my work, and by extension at CSET, we're asking the so what question, right? Especially because we're community facing and working with community, and at times working for community. There are times the community might reach out to us and say, can you do this for us? In the case of the Uganda Canadian Association of Saskatchewan, where they want to create this work with immigrants, and they have to call us to work, both with them, but then for them in achieving an amazing agenda, which is creating space for immigrants to express themselves. Participation is critical, and I did mention that earlier on. And of course, the creative practice, which I did say earlier on, that the idea of us talking about theater here is really thinking about drama, and theater in that whole, complete sense, for debate, to foster collaboration and social interaction, both among people and in community. In terms of our methodology, it's community-based, CBPR, and everything that works around that. Of course, I've talked about devising already, and of course, art-based research, because all of these are interwoven, in many ways. And so these are really very important in not just what we do alone, but how we do what we do. And also part of the process of doing this is to, I'm hoping the community will start thinking, finding ways that, maybe their research or their ideas, can, align with whatever, CSET is presenting here. These are the themes that CSET is working on right now. I'm not going to elaborate on that. I've mentioned a little bit about, kind of spoken about them already at the beginning. And under each of them, there are multiple research projects happening already. And I'm, happy to chat more about that. In terms of when we're thinking locally, I've talked about the police and community engagement here and beyond, engaging with immigrants and refugees. These are Town and Gown. By Town and Gown series, what we mean is that, the community and of course the university, how do we come together to engage together? The third one is around socially engaged theater, and of course devising, and that's an interesting project for us, research project, because, in our research, it's important, it's important to note that there are different ideas of what socially engaged theater and of course devising means to many people. So it'll be interesting to, we're working around creating this research where we want the community to speak to in their own voice, harvest multiple, perspectives around what, this concept really means. A campus series, we're going to be launching that very soon, and we're starting with a PhD student and of course a non-resident research associate, and I'm happy to speak more about that. And of course, the goal is that, for as many that are interested, whether on campus here, both in a faculty map and other, faculties within the university and outside, that, they'll be, they can present with a lot of the interaction and collaboration that I already, and relationship that I already have, both here within Canada and outside. This would be a very good opportunity for our grad students to connect to other grad students, in the, outside, the Regina and of course Canada. In terms of our collaboration and connection to device theater program at the University of Regina, and that's also, like I said, that's really also very important in terms of, again, the strategic positioning of how all of this research agenda find a way, not just that for the new program to,
to advance what we're doing at CSET, no, but really to create a space where both can actually thrive. So right now we're in conversation around Crossing Currents, which is an amazing, successful one-year run already across, the country, where we're having really conversation that are important, both the pedagogy and of course to our students here. There's a conversation around art and disability already in terms of the connection around that. And of course, I'll be also teaching applied theater courses within that. I intentionally put the indigenous community focus here, and that's because right now we don't have anything yet, and that's because I prefer that relationship to develop organically versus just forcing things. But just to say that that's something that we're thinking carefully and respectfully and responsibly, because that's also important that we take that moment to learn, to listen, and of course to show up where we need to show up, and of course be there when needed. And the last thing on this here is in terms of internship opportunities, and I just want to kind of highlight that right now we have one intern with us at CSET. She's coming to us from Arts Leadership Program that I co-created in 2020 between British Columbia and Saskatchewan, and so they've graciously, one person is really interning with us right now, and as a way to learn, based on their interest of what they want to learn and some of our research. Our global thinking around that local is how do we're constantly creating collaboration around research, our publications, mentoring and internship, a professional development and service, and of course, finally, the IT International Theatre Institute, UNESCO Network for Higher Education in the Performing Arts. The University of Regina is a member now, and that network is housed within CSET. These are ongoing programs. We have CSET talks, CSET research, and of course CSET publications, and all these details of these, obviously, they're on the website. I just wanted to highlight that and how we've kind of categorized some of those things. And then here's me rounding up here, my presentation. I'll open things up for conversation. But I'd like to just highlight that this is a quote that has sort of becomes my go-to and my motivation, in some of my own work, and of course by extension to CSET. It's that theater, empathy, emotions, affect, as it were. Affect is one of the currency that we thrive with, in our own world, and I'm using currency not in the sense of that economic sense, but it's what we offer, we exchange. It become that means of exchange. That's the essence of. That's what I mean by the currency. So here is my hope that emotions might move us to social action. So that the affect might move us to social action, that empathy might challenge and enhance our critical thinking capacity, so that we can really beckon to a future characterized by equity. And for some of the projects that we've been in, that we're doing already, these are things that we're really talking about, that how can we forge a new path? We don't want to go back, we want to move forward, but in meaningful ways characterized by equity. And we're hoping that all of these ideas will, that's us answering the so what question, right? I'll leave it at that. And then to highlight that, you can always connect to us. These are social media information on YouTube, on email, social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and of course, our LinkedIn. I think that's my presentation, and then I will stop sharing now, and then I welcome questions. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.